Hello, and thanks for your company today. I hope you've been having a lovely week. I certainly have, as A Breath of Fresh Air has just picked up the award for the Best Music Podcast in the Women in Podcasting Awards. It's another timely one today because we're paying homage to a fabulous 70s and 80s musician who crafted and sang so many of the songs we grew up with. We all know him as Huey Lewis, the guy who's been out front of Huey Lewis and the News for decades. He's the singer who can no longer sing after his hearing loss worsened as a result of Meniere's disease in 2018. So today we're celebrating Huey's extraordinary career as told by his band member, friend and drummer, Bill Gibson.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
You've been a busy player, haven't you, all your life?
Pretty much, yeah. Ever since I first picked up the sticks at about age 10.
What was it that enamored you about drumming?
It was my father, actually. He was a frustrated jazz drummer. Took me to see Buddy Rich and Count Basie and Duke Ellington. And, we'd go to the Monterey Jazz Festival every year. And he just loved the drums. And he would show me small little things on the kit, and he couldn't really teach me that well, but, he could show me what he knew, which was actually plenty. And once you learn how to swing, you're halfway there if you're a drummer.
Oh, is that right? Amazing places that he took you to. I mean, other kids go for bushwalks or for, I don't know, country visits, whatever. And he was taking you to all these incredible concerts. Were you enjoying them at the time?
Oh, yeah. Loved it. Loved every minute of it.
So you think you had the music in you?
Definitely. My family is a musical family. My mom led the church choir. And I remember as a real young kid, 5, 6 years old, they would have choir practices in our living room. She would play the piano and they'd do choir practice. And so there was always constantly music in my house. My dad would come home from work and put on Art Blakey and Buddy Rich and Basie. So it was always going in my house.
Do you remember actually making a conscious decision that this is what you were going to do with your life, or did it kind of just slide into that?
I did. And it happened a couple of different times. When I was about 12 or 13, I think. My parents were so cool. They took my sister and I to see the Beatles twice. My father took my sister and I to see the Dave Clark Five in San Francisco. Dave Clark was up there, and they had great songs, I thought, but he was just a hammer it out on 1, 2, 3, and 4, And my dad hits me in the arm. He goes, "You can do that. That guy's just hammering nails up there. He's a carpenter. You can do that." So I thought, you're right, I can. And it kind of blossomed from there. Then when I really realized that it was why I was put on the planet was I was about 21 and the guitar player in my band was murdered. He and his parents were murdered in our hometown. And that was a huge traumatic deal for our band, obviously, at the time. And after that, we realized that the reason we're put here was because we take people's minds off of their everyday problems if it's only for an hour or 2 hours or whatever.
So that band was called Soundhole, wasn't it? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we just started playing in Dan's basement and we played all kinds of stuff. We played Mahavishnu Orchestra stuff. We played Frank Zappa and we started writing our own material at that time. And it just kind of developed.
You were in the Bay Area of San Francisco at the time. There were loads of bands around you then, weren't there?
Oh, yeah, everywhere. Everybody was in a band. In my hometown, everybody was in a band. Most of the famous bands in the Bay Area at that time had moved to Marin, like, the Grateful Dead lived in Marin. Quicksilver Messenger Service, which was Mario Cipollina's older brother John's band. They lived in Mill Valley. Some guys from Blood, Sweat, and Tears lived in Mill Valley. It was just amazing, the musical scene. I go to the Fillmore Auditorium every week and see the bands, where everybody came in. There was nothing else I was going to do by that point.
One of your main competitors was a band called Clover, wasn't it?
Yeah. Huey and I went to junior high school together. So we'd known each other from just being Mill Valley kids forever. And finally, we just said, well, look, let's not compete. We're friends. And it just kind of turned into a family, at that point.
Right. So how did you end up amalgamating with Huey?
Clover went to London in 1977, I believe. They got a record deal with Phonogram and they cut 2 records over there. And I mean, Huey tells this story great. The day they landed in London to start their big adventure was the day the Sex Pistols broke.
Oh,
So the
no.
punk scene broke. And all of a sudden, here's these California kids who are playing kind of country pop, competing with the Clash and the Sex Pistols and bands like that. So a whole new scene just exploded over there right as they got there. They lived there for 2 years and they really tried hard. They did a bunch of tours. They toured with Thin Lizzy over there. They toured with Leonard Skinner. And they finally kind of realized that, well, it's not really going to happen for us. So they came back to Marin and disbanded. And at that time, Soundhold had disbanded, and I was playing with Jack Cassidy, who was the bass player in the Jefferson Airplane. And Jack, myself, Nick Buck, who was with Hot Tuna, keyboard player, and Brian Marnell, who was our guitar player in Soundhold, had started kind of like a new wave punk band, SVT. And we were playing all over the place. But it really wasn't my style of music. So we put together Monday Night Live jam session at our local club. We called it Monday Night Live. And it was Huey, myself, Johnny Cola from the News, Sean Hopper from the News. And we just did a variety show. And we back up people like Ricky Lee Jones would come in, and Van Morrison and Boss Skaggs and Tommy Johnson from the Doobies. They'd come in and we back them up for a set. It just turned into a thing. And we started writing our own material. Bob Brown, who eventually turned out to be our manager, the News's manager, said, hey, why don't you guys quit what you're doing and put this band together, which is what we did. And then we shopped it around and eventually got a deal.
And at that time you were named Huey Lewis and the American Express, is that right?
Yes. We started as the Fools. Then it went Huey Lewis and the Fools. Then it went, Huey Lewis and the American Express, which is the name we were going to use on our first album. But on the evening before the release, we got a cease and desist from American Express, and we didn't think we really wanted to take them on, you know. So our manager came up with, well, what about the News? And Huey said, yeah, I guess so. Well, the Rolling Stones is already taken. So, yeah, okay, we'll go with the News.
How come Huey got top billing?
Because he was going to be the face out there and the guy singing the songs. He was the handsome, motivated lead singer type, class A personality. And, you know, there was Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers had just come out. Yes. Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band. You know, true. There was a lot of examples. So,
but nobody in the band minded that it was going to be called Huey Lewis and the American Express or Huey Lewis and the News. It didn't matter.
No, because we figured if we failed, it would be Huey Lewis's name.
But success didn't come straight away. The band's self-titled debut in 1980 went largely unnoticed. Huey Lewis and the News did finally break through to the top 40 with the gold album Picture This 2 years later. It rose to number 13 on the album charts thanks to this track, Do You Believe in Love?
There was the possibility that it could have taken our egos, you know, but we always had this kind of self-regulating system to it. If anybody showed any sign of kind of getting big-headed, 5 other guys would just slap him down, you know, and say, what are you talking about, you know? And we'd do the same with Huey. One thing he learned from Philip Lynott, which was really big, was Philip told him, you know, you meet the same people on the way down as you do on the way up. So be nice to everyone. And, you know, don't be a big rock star asshole to somebody because you're going to see this same person on the way back down. And that is so true.
Yeah. So it was 1982 when your second studio album, the self-produced Picture This, came out. And that was the one that turned gold. And it was absolutely fueled by the breakout success of that hit single, Do You Believe in Love, which was written by former Clover producer Mutt Lange. That's right?
Right. Yeah. Right.
You said that you became known as a result of that. Did you realise that that was going to be a hit when you were recording it?
We had an idea. We thought that sure sounds like a hit single to us, you know, and at that point, that's what we needed. In order to keep our record deal with Christmas, we were going to have a hit. Mutt gave that to us, and it was called We Both Believe in Love. And Huey hated the lyric. So he changed it. Huey just rewrote the lyrics just a little bit, which was really a good idea. So that was a kind of a change that I think put it over the top. I'll never forget the first time I heard it on the radio. I was driving through San Anselmo here in Marin, and it came on the radio. I pulled over to the side of the road. I went, that's us. And of course, there was no cell phones then, so I couldn't call anybody. But I sat there and listened to it and went home and called everybody I knew and said, did you hear it? Did you hear it? We're on the radio. And then it just took off.
Bill, what was Huey writing about mainly? Was he drawing from his life experience?
Some of it, yeah. And some of the tunes were about guys that we knew or girls that we knew. He had kind of had this idea that he was going to keep his tongue firmly implanted in his cheek for most of his writing. It was going to be cute and funny somehow and witty. He always wanted to be witty. So I think it shows, on a lot of our tunes.
How ambitious was the band? Were you in there for good times and a bit of money, or did you really beat yourselves up wanting to get to the top?
In our minds, we were the best band in the world, and we were going to make it no matter what. We had so much blind faith that it was insane. We knew we were going to be successful. We just knew it because we knew we were good.
You had that feeling from the outset?
From the get-go.
And I suppose you have to have that feeling, don't you? If you lose sight of that blind faith, as you put it, you could easily fall apart. And I mean, that's what happens to so many of them anyway.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And, we always had this system when we first started, after our first hit, after Do You Believe in Love, we really started getting a lot of recognition. And then sports hit, and it just took off. And I mean, it was massive. We were one of the biggest bands in the world for those kind of 5 years after sports.
How did it change your lives?
Well, it took me away from home is what it did. I mean, it put us on the road for about the next 10 years. I never got the out and about recognition that Huey got, obviously. Huey at one point just couldn't go eat dinner anywhere because he was so recognizable.
There's quite a downside to all of that attention, isn't there? How did Huey handle it?
Oh, well, he handled it very well. And one thing he did was go up to Montana and build a ranch on 600 acres, which pretty much takes you away from everything. Don't get me wrong, he soaked up all the attention. If you're at dinner with him, he'll eat 2 plates of food to your 1 and dominate the conversation all at the same time. He is just a goer. He'll talk forever.
A complete extrovert, Huey Lewis was born in New York City in 1950 to an Irish-American father and a mother who had emigrated from Warsaw in Poland. By the time Huey Lewis and the News released their third album, Sports, they were superstars the world over. The album came in second on the end-of-year charts for 1984 and spawned 4 top 10 hits, including a Grammy nomination. Bill tells us how it came to be.
We had Harder Rock and Roll. We had that album recorded and went out on the road for 6 weeks, played a club tour. It was fortunate that we did that because we noticed that when we got back off that tour, we were playing them a lot better than we'd recorded them before. So we had a chance to go back in and re-record Harder Rock and Roll and re-record New Drug.
And what happened with Ray Parker Jr.?
Well, what happened was CBS called us and asked us if they could use I Want a New Drug in the movie Ghostbusters. Yeah. And at the time, it was number 6 on the charts. We were on top of the world. We didn't see a reason to put it into a movie. So we said, we'll pass, that's okay. So they went to Ray Parker Jr. and they said, we need you to write us a tune that's like I Want a New Drug by Huey Lewis and the News. So Ray came up with Ghostbusters. And when it came out, I remember we were on the road and I got a phone call from a friend of mine. He says, have you heard this Ghostbusters theme? I said, no, I haven't. No. He says, you guys better look into this. So we sued and CBS settled with us out of court.
But isn't ripping off now called sampling?
Definitely. But if it's more than 6 bars, it's plagiarism. You can tell. It's easy, especially for a musician.
So the score was settled and Huey Lewis and the News went back to enjoying their huge chart success.
The first single was Heart and Soul, and it just blew up. And I mean, that album, it seemed like it was never going to stop. We had 5 top 10 singles off that record.
You must have been shocked by its success.
Yeah, we were. The year before, we'd gone on a tour with Loverboy as support. I remember our production manager coming up to me after one of the gigs, and he says, next year, this time, you're going to be headlining these places. And I looked at him, I said, really? We are? He says, yeah, mark my words. Sure enough, he was right. We were back out there with the Neville brothers the following year playing arenas. And the following year, we had Stevie Ray Vaughan with us for about 9 months. And that time period went by so quickly, but that was really one of the most amazing times of my life that I can think of. That was an incredible time. I remember we were on the road 13 out of 15 months in 85 and 86. We went around the world twice. We had the Tower of Power horn section with us. You know, it was just a thrill to have those guys with us. Everywhere we went, we were massive and screaming, adulating fans, you know. It was great.
Did you take your family on tour with you?
No, I didn't have a family. I had a wife at that point. I got married on June 23rd of 1984 and left the following day for basically the next 7 years on the road. On our very first bus tour, we played clubs, and all the girls wanted to come out and travel with us, figuring, oh, it's going to be a big party. It's great, you know. So they did. They came out for a week. And by the end of that week, every single one of them said, I'm never doing that again.
Why?
Too much, too hard, too difficult. You know, we'd be up there playing and they'd be in the audience partying. Then we go to sleep and we're up at 7 the next morning. Come on, honey. Come on. It's time to go. We got to go. Oh, I'm not ready. You know, come on. You know, and so they couldn't do it. They just couldn't keep up. Even 1 week in, they couldn't keep up.
So how do you do it? You just run on adrenaline all the time?
No, you just get into you get your little procedure down. It just becomes second nature. It was never a problem for us.
But you're obviously not getting the right amount of sleep. You're probably not eating the right sorts of food. How do you keep going and going and going like that?
Well, that's a good question. Probably the adrenaline behind it. I remember early on, we did our fair share of partying. So there was times when we'd play the show, then we'd go back to the hotel, and then there'd be a big party till all hours of the morning. Then you'd finally get to bed and get up at 7 or whatever you had to get up and get back on the bus. And everybody would get back on the bus and go straight to their bunk and go to sleep. You'd wake up in the next city and get off the bus and go right into sound check. And you were dead at sound check. You get through sound check. Now it's 6. Now you eat a little food. Now you're starting to come alive again. Now you're getting built up for the show. And by the time the show hits, you're there. You're ready to go again. And then the whole cycle starts again. So you had basically 21 hours to get ready for the next show.
I think it was 85 when you joined the crew for We Are the World, right?
Yeah.
How was that?
Unbelievable. It was after the American Music Awards was that night. So the session didn't start till midnight. And everybody congregated at A&M after that. And we'd won a couple of awards at that show that night. And then we all went over to A&M. And, you know, I'm looking around and there's Michael Jackson, there's Ray Charles, there's Stevie Wonder, there's Bob Dylan, there's Bruce Springsteen. We knew some of the guys, the Journey guys we knew because they're local. There's Daryl Hall. There's right in front of us is the Jacksons. Right to the left of us are the Pointer Sisters. There's Dan Aykroyd standing in back of us. It was crazy because they're all people that, I mean, Stevie Wonder was a hero of mine, pretty much my whole life, you know. And to be in the same room with that guy and to listen, watch him to see what he did, and it was amazing.
Would you say that was one of the highlights of your life?
Definitely. You know, they gave out sheet music to everyone there. And there was a point in the proceedings where we took a break. I think Quincy was talking. He said, you should take this time to go around the room and get everybody's autographs on your sheet music. So that's what we did. You know, Diana Ross came up to me and said, here, would you autograph my thing? Like, sure. You know, would you autograph mine? Sure. You know, Bruce or, you know, James Ingram, you know, we all went around the room having everybody autograph our sheet music, which was a thrill.
It sounds like something you do at school camp.
Yeah.
And they actually gave Huey a solo for We Are the World, didn't they?
They did. And wow. Because Huey, I'm not going to say anything bad about my boss, but he's no Stevie Wonder. Let's put it that way.
He must have been thrilled.
Oh, he was beside himself.
It was
Yeah,
completely unexpected.
completely, because he took Prince's line. Prince didn't show up. Prince had given us our award that night at the American Music Awards,
Right.
and he skipped the deal. I don't know why, but he skipped the thing. So they gave his line to Huey.
Did you ever find out where Prince had shot off to?
We never found out.
That was the same year that Power of Love came out, wasn't it?
That's right.
It featured in the film Back to the Future.
Yeah, it did.
Tell me a little bit about that song.
Well, Bob Zemeckis, who was the director of Back to the Future, called Huey personally and said, I got this movie idea that we're doing. So we would be real honored if you guys would write a tune or two for the movie. And as it happened, we'd already had Power of Love that we'd been working on for the 4 album. And we said, well, this might work. And Sean wrote Back in Time for the second song, and that worked out perfect. And so we gave those 2 tunes to Bob, and he just absolutely loved them.
Power of Love was nominated for an Academy Award, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. And we played the Academy Awards that year. And it should have won. It should have won Song of the Year at the Grammys, and it should have won that Academy Award. But it was so political, and it was apparently it was Lionel Richie's year that his record company had paid somebody off, and that song "Say You Say Me" that he put out, which was a ripoff of A Day in the Life, really, that won all those awards. And it was like Power of Love was 10 times the song that was. And everybody knew it. Everybody told us so. Even the people down in LA were telling us so. Says, you guys got juked on that one,
So needless to say, you were a little disappointed.
Very disappointed, yeah.
Did you not realize at that point how political those things are?
We didn't. And that's when we realized how political those award shows are.
Did you get any time off between hit songs, or you just had to keep it moving the whole time?
Very, very little time off. I think we had maybe 2 weeks at the most off at a time between tours. And it was funny. I have 2 daughters. My first daughter was born in 1988, and my second daughter was born in 1991. Our front of house sound engineer, who had been with us forever, he has 2 daughters. And his first daughter was born in 88 and 91. They're both 2 weeks apart. So we could go back and tell when we were home.
It's a great time, but it's also a really tough time. I think a lot of people don't realize that there's not a whole lot of glamour associated with being number one and being on the road constantly.
I didn't realize it at the time. And I think it took me a long, long time to realize it. I don't think I've realized it until maybe the last 5 or 10 years. There was a lot of sacrifice. I didn't see it as sacrifice because I was having the time of my life. It was fantastic. But there was a lot of sacrifice. And I realize it now talking to my adult daughters. They remembered missing me a lot.
Bill Gibson, can we talk a minute about Hip to Be Square?
Yeah.
That was also a huge number one for you. I'm intrigued by how Huey got pinned with that persona.
Yeah. Huey and I actually sat down at a bar in San Anselmo with a bar napkin. I wrote the music before he wrote the words. He wrote it in the third person, which made a lot of sense because he was writing it about someone else. And at the very last minute when we recorded it, he decided to do it in the first person, which made it sound like he was talking about us and himself. So we release it and people think, oh God, these guys are really square. And that the Los Angeles Police Department took it on as their theme song. And we went, oh my God, we shot ourselves in the foot here. It did kind of make us sound like we were square, which is it's not the way we were at all.
Huey Lewis and the News were anything but square. The late 80s saw Huey Lewis and the News still at the top of their game. Hits like Jacob's Ladder, I Know What I Like, and Doing It All for My Baby struck a chord with audiences everywhere.
We came off the road for 2 years after that. Huey went up to Montana. He had 2 young kids as well, and he took his wife up to Montana for 2 years. He wanted to get away from it all, not do anything. I wasn't too keen on that because I'm a musician and I like to play. So I can't even remember what I did for those 2 years.
Well, that was my next question.
Yeah, probably just sat and wrote music and played a lot of golf and went into the studio and wrote.
So you would have been quite frustrated then if you all you really wanted to do was play and you weren't able to.
Yeah, yeah.
And you couldn't go out and play with anybody else.
I suppose I could have, but nobody called.
They didn't know you were available.
They didn't know I was available.
So who made the decision to come back on the road then?
Well, we had another record to do. We had a deal that we'd signed with EMI. We had a record to do with them. So Huey came back down and we started working on Hard at Play, which we didn't really have a lot of songs for. We had a couple. We had Build Me Up, I think, and a couple days off. And that album, we took a lot of outside tunes in. We were real prolific there, writing wise, for about 6 or 7 years. And then we kind of hit a wall writing, which everybody does, unless you're, Paul McCartney or somebody.
Yeah.
So we didn't have a lot of tunes for that record. So we started pulling in outside tunes and we started recording it. And there was some people didn't like the producer after we had produced all our own albums before that. We thought, well, we need to get somebody else to produce it. And I don't know why we did that because we didn't need to do that. It was all just a lot of headwinds that were happening at that time.
That you hadn't struck before.
Exactly.
How did it feel for you? On one hand, logically, writers hit brick walls. But when it actually happens to you after having such a great run, how did that feel when it's like, none of us have got anything, we need help?
Not great, obviously. I knew that we still were a great live band, always a great live band. So we could always do that. We had a big fan base. But recording wise, we thought, well, Nirvana just hit, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, all this grunge stuff. Seattle blew up and all that stuff started taking off. And we thought, well, we're going into a new period of music here. So we're going to have to reinvent ourselves, which is what we did for our album after Hard at Play. Hard at Play was a good record. It had a lot of machine stuff on it. Had a lot of drum machine stuff, had a lot of sequenced keyboards. It had a lot of sampled things, which was kind of coming into vogue at the time. So it wasn't so played live as the previous stuff was. Everything was changing at that. Everything was changing.
And not for the better.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah.
And did it work for you?
Reinventing ourselves? Somewhat, I think. Somewhat. Not commercially as in terms of sales of records, but live, our live shows went over great. Growing up, we were all R&B people. I'm a James Brown devotee, and we all are. We love James Brown. We loved Wilson Pickett. We loved Marvin Gaye. We loved the Motown scene. We loved Muscle Shoals. We loved all the R&B stuff. Yeah. And we thought, let's do a cover of old R&B tunes. It'd be really fun. And we'll do it live. We'll be the whole band set up in a studio and we'll do it live. And we did it and it came out great. That's one of our best sounding albums, I think.
Huey Lewis and the News finally called it quits in 2018. Not because they didn't get on, not because their music was no longer popular, but because Huey suffered a major health setback. He had developed Meniere's disease years earlier, an inner ear disorder which worsened and meant sometimes his hearing abruptly disappeared altogether.
It hit overnight, literally. We were in Dallas, Texas. We were sound checking and he came walking in. He's going, is that PA distorting? And we said, no, it sounds fine to us. He goes, man, that PA is distorted. Then we went and played the gig that night and he was like a whole step off. And we'd had a meeting that day, actually. We'd had a band meeting in his hotel room. And he was sitting there and he's looking at it. He goes, I can't hear what you guys are saying. We didn't think much of it, because he lost his hearing in his left ear 25 years ago. So he was really only working on one good ear. And the one good ear went overnight. And we played that gig and it was awful. And then we had another show the next week in New Orleans. And we flew down to New Orleans. He came to the sound check. By that time, they had him on prednisone. They'd given him an injection of prednisone to see if that would help. And it freaked him out. And I don't know if you've ever had to take prednisone for anything, but it's a super strong steroid that has real adverse effects on some people. And it made his skin crawl. He was beside himself the night before the gig. He didn't know what to do. And he came to the sound check next day, and he took one listen to the band playing. He says, can't do it. We had to cancel right there. Remember, I went right from the sound check back to the hotel, packed, flew home, and that was the last the band ever got together.
Wow. When was that?
That was in 2018, February 2018.
What a sad realization that.
Yeah, really sad. And, you know, to this day, he can't put on an album and listen to music. He just can't hear it. He says anything with like low end or at any level, at any loud level, it just sounds like a jet engine to him. It's distorted.
And there's nothing they can do for him.
He's been everywhere. He's been to all the major hearing clinics. He's been everywhere, and he's tried everything that the docs have told him. Nothing. It's interesting. Hearing is one of the only pieces of medical science that they really don't know how to fix.
Can he function adequately?
Yeah. He can function adequately. If it's a perfectly quiet room, like if it's just, you know, like you and I sitting here talking, if it's he and I sitting here talking, he has hearing aids.
Right.
And he has this little device. Looks like a hockey puck, and he puts it on the table. If he's in a room full of people, puts it on the table, and it picks up the conversation and pipes it in. But if it's he and I just sitting here, he's okay. A lot of times he'll, you know, ask you to repeat yourself, and which I'm used to with him. And I have the kind of voice that kind of cuts, and it's high, mid, so it kind of cuts through, and so he can understand me, fortunately. But yeah, he's okay if there's few people.
Yeah.
But if it's a restaurant, or say, or a place where there's a din, you know, there's a lot of noise going on, a lot of ambient noise, you can't hear a thing.
Can't handle that. No, I got to say, I mean, a lot of us without such an affliction have trouble with those sort of things as we get older too.
Me too.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, as a result, it's changed his lifestyle up greatly, and people with lesser afflictions wouldn't have been able to handle that well at all. He's got to be really emotionally strong. I suppose you just have to put up with whatever you're given.
Yeah, well, the first year was the most difficult for him. He got depressed. He was very depressed because he realized that, you know, he feels responsible for our organization. We had a crew that depended on us. We had office people that depended on us. And when we had to kind of shut down the operation and get rid of all the gear and let the crew go and let the tour manager go, that was really hard for him, you know, and hard for everybody, you know, because we were a family for 40 years. And that was very difficult for everyone, but for him particularly, he kind of felt responsible for that. So he got real depressed, and he actually contemplated, he told me, he contemplated, you know, ending things, you know, very briefly, but realized that, well, no, he can't do that. He's got people who rely on him. He's got 2 kids, you know, who he loves dearly, and that was never going to be an option. So he was definitely depressed.
Thank goodness that Huey has always been a fly fishing fanatic. It's something he does a lot these days, and it's been his saviour. Music-wise, the band has been able to release one more album. It's their first set of original songs since 2001's Plan B. So how's Bill Gibson been spending his time since that album?
I started taking drum lessons because I'd never taken lessons before. I'm a self-taught player. I knew if I went through life not learning the math behind drumming and the techniques, I knew I was going to regret that. So I was on the internet one day, and this guy popped up, summer camp, take a summer camp. And I said, I'm signing up. I take a Zoom lesson every Saturday.
You're incredible. So 30 years of playing the drums or more, and then you start taking lessons.
Yeah. I'm a far better player today than I was 5 years ago.
Bill Gibson, thank you so much for talking with us today. You've been amazing.
Appreciate it.
All
All the
very
best.
And just as a footnote, Huey Lewis has just been awarded this year's Lifetime Achievement Award at the organisation Rockers on Broadway. It's certainly well deserved, isn't it? I hope you can join me again same time next week. Bye now.